Hello, friends. Welcome. So happy to be with you here. This is a special webinar presentation, The Need for Mindfulness Teachers in Times of Global Trauma, times like these. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it's my great joy, honor, and privilege to be able to be here together and host this webinar with two of the most well-respected and beloved meditation teachers of our time, Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield. Welcome, Tara. Welcome, Jack.
Happy to be
What a
here.
pleasure.
Right here at the beginning, I want to start with this question about the times we're in. It seems to me like every time is a time when the world, when our cultures can benefit from there being well-trained mindfulness teachers. But what about this time in particular makes the need for mindfulness teachers so great? Tara, Jack, who wants to start?
I'm glad to jump in. Yeah, so you're right. It's throughout history. And when you say that, I think, wow, this is the first time we humans have faced an extinction crisis. And but the other piece is that many people sense this, that the pace of change is happening so fast that our human bodies and minds can't keep up. Just the speed of society is just keeping us in this agitated swirl. And about 2 hours ago, I was reading something and I actually wrote it down and wanted to share it here with all of you. And this is Johann Hari, and it's in his book, Stolen Focus. And he says, civilization has been covered with itching powder, and we spend our time twitching and twerking our minds, unable to simply give attention to the things that matter. So it feels like these are times that are really begging us to come back to what matters, to be able to save our earth and each other. And meditation brings our attention back into the moment. So yeah, that's enough for now.
His line, his line should have been twitching, twerking, and tweeting, but that's another story. To add a tiny bit, all of us can see that with all this modern development of online technology and computers and social media and the bigger technological developments, of nanotechnology and biotechnology and space technology and all of these things, that none of that outer technology is going to stop continuing warfare and racism and continuing tribalism and conflict, because all of those things are rooted in the human heart. And so if we want to both protect and in some way benefit the world, the outer technology that's so extraordinary now has to be matched by the inner technology of the heart. And that's really our task in this generation, this time, and what teachers of compassion, mindfulness, and so forth, we have practices that can do that. So that's another part of that equation.
And just to add something, because you just made me think about it, Jack, is that this is the first time I think that there's been a huge receptivity to mindfulness, that there's this evolution of consciousness where there are amazing numbers of people who want to learn. So there's actually a demand, a need for teachers, which is exciting.
And the two of you have joined together to create the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program. It's already had 3 cohorts, and the 4th cohort is starting next year. People are signing up now. This is a 2-year intensive online training program. And of course, you can learn more about it. There's a Learn More button right on this page that people can click. What I want to know from both of you is, what's your vision for how mindfulness teachers are going to be leaders, are going to be important figures of healing and service, instruments of healing and service right now at this time? What's your vision for that?
I need to start small. I mean, I love your question of getting a note from a woman who went through the last cohort. And again, we've had almost 5,000 people in 70 countries. And she's in Lahore, Pakistan. And she said, you know, times have been very difficult here. And I've been teaching compassion practice and centering mindfulness in a women's clinic, and people so love it. And it's changing their lives. And some of them are teaching it to others. Or a note from a guy in Nairobi who said, I'm putting it into our school system. And with climate change, we're all dealing with all these difficulties. And the kids, and even more than the kids, the teachers are really appreciating and valuing this. So there's something about the seeds that we get to plant globally, and that each person who participates in the training finds their place, and then that blossoms and they pass it on to others. So it's actually really kind of heartening and exciting.
Yeah, I've been amazed that even in the places with, the most strife, I think of, at the height of, after all the devastation, the hurricane in Puerto Rico, how a woman who was in the training at the time organized all these people to be able to practice and find a center and find resilience in the midst of that. And, I think about, all these places like Hong Kong and Ethiopia and Israel and Palestine, as Jack mentioned, Pakistan, where there's so much strife going on. We have people in Ukraine right now that are in the training. Right now, they're in an inactive stage, but planning to set up a mindfulness center in Ukraine. And the rest of what's so moving is the other members of the cohort are going to be getting behind them and helping to support that. So it's just what Jack said, it's planting those seeds, and not just in the dramatic ways, but also by setting up mindfulness communities all over the world where people that just want to feel connection and belonging have a way, both online and locally, to practice and support each other and growing. It's quite a beautiful rippling that's happening.
Now, there's a lot to talk about here, and I specifically want to talk about what it means for someone to be a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher and how the program prepares people for that. And when you're leading a meditation program, when people have trauma come up, how does a trained mindfulness facilitator deal with that? But even before we get there, I'm imagining that person who's listening to this and they feel a kind of inner call. They're drawn. I think I want to become a mindfulness teacher. But, and then they have a whole bunch of buts. But I think one of the main buts that could come up right even at the beginning is, I don't know if I'm quote unquote evolved enough. I don't know if I'm together enough. I've got a lot of, challenges I'm dealing with during this time of great disruption. What would you say to that person right here at the beginning of our conversation who's questioning
Well,
their own capacities? Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I love hearing that question from whoever you are, person, X out there, or Y or Z or whatever, because there's actually some humility in it. If somebody said, I got it and I really want to convert the world, I'd be kind of cautious, frankly, and I'd be worried for their family as well. But on the other hand, those kind of questions are really part of the process of becoming a teacher. And one of the most beautiful things that people discover is that by going through a program like this and learning to articulate and guide others in compassion and mindfulness, you actually learn it better. It turns out that you're not the expert, but it becomes a practice that you go through. And in doing it, you digest it and own it and become part of it in a way that really it seasons you in a beautiful way and matures you in ways you couldn't imagine. So I would encourage a person like that to say, yes, of course, doubt is natural. We all have doubt, and steep yourself in this and see how it transforms you.
So I'm really glad this you brought this question in, Tammy, because I actually had somebody ask me yesterday about this coming program. And I asked some questions. I said, well, is the emotional intensity of what you live with interfering with work and relationships? The person said, no, no, not like that. Because the truth is, if there's trauma and emotional challenge that is interfering on that level, then wait, it's like that's you'd want more stability. But for this person, like so many of us, we're all in a healing process in some way. We all get difficult emotions and have challenges in life. And as Jack said, if mindfulness becomes like at the center, this cherished pathway, then it all becomes grist. It becomes part of the more we wake up with what's going on for us, the more we can help others wake up in the same ways.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned, Tara, a group of mindfulness teachers working in the Ukraine. And I think the war in the Ukraine, the collective trauma that we're all witnessing and that we're connected to, has brought up all kinds of greater feelings of instability and individual trauma. And I wonder if we could understand from both of your perspectives how you see the collective trauma impacting individuals. And as a mindfulness teacher, how you view that and how you work with it in yourselves and with the people who come to your trainings.
Well, I'm inclined to start really personally and say that with all that's going on in our world, the world's crises, I can feel my nervous system. There's this kind of background hum of it can be agitation at times, and sometimes it's powerless, and sometimes I feel anger. So I can feel it. I can feel it moving through, and partly depends on how good my news diet is. But, you know, what I've found is this, that when I pause and I bring these practices, this medicine of mindfulness and compassion to what's going on, what I find is under, let's say, my anger, because that comes up, I feel I kind of come into a grieving, like there's something I'm really, really grieving, some losses in our world that I'm really grieving. I find that under anger, there's always something I care about. And then when I get to that, then that unlayering brings up a huge tenderness. And then I'm able to respond to my daily life and my world in a much more wise way. And I'm also thinking about one man who's really horrified and distraught about Ukraine, and because his friends there, he's tracking daily. And for him, the breath, just long, deep breathing, coming back just this moment, just this moment, just this moment. And then loving kindness prayers. And now he's, raising money for food kitchens in Ukraine. But it's been the trauma that he was feeling has kind of been shifted into really wise action. And I'll share one more example, Tammy, because it really struck me. And this is a woman I worked with a few months ago. And she takes a subway and then a train every day to work. And it's through the inner city. And it's a lot of crime and violence. And of course, it gets worse and worse as summer approaches. So she's feeling a lot of fear. Just that background violence is just creating fear in her nervous system. So for her, being able to name what comes up, hold it with self-compassion. She started doing metta on the train for everybody else on the train, and feeling this sense of this shift from her kind of a scared self to a we're in it together. And that's what I found is most helpful for people when the trauma is really coming up inside them. Trauma feels like disconnection. And these practices bring us back into a kind of a sense of belonging to each other in our world that's really healing.
Jack?
Yeah, I also worked a little bit with some people in Ukraine, among other places, in Myanmar and places of war and conflict. And I want to remind them that we have these inner resources, even in the midst of trauma. that Thich Nhat Hanh, who died recently and was such a kind of lodestar of wisdom for us, said when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained centered and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone on that boat to survive. And there's some way in which, through these practices, I can invite people to remember their courage and their capacity. And even if, as Tara says, it's as simple as this moment, this day, one breath at a time. Can you take one mindful breath? How does that feel? All of a sudden, you start to get grounded in a deeper truth than the changing trauma or circumstances. Remember that your ancestors, that human beings have lived through hard times, and there are ways to do this that carry the best of your spirit. And people get really transformed in being reminded of this.
So again, we'll turn to our mythic person listening, who I imagine might have a question like this. I feel like I have a certain amount of skills and capacities to deal with my own triggers when they come up. But I actually feel a little terrified about teaching meditation to people and knowing that as they're starting to explore deeper into their own inner life, they're going to hit some big pot of trauma that's been stored there that they've been denying. How am I going to help them work through that? Am I going to say, just, stay on your cushion, keep meditating? I'm not a trained psychologist. How will I know how to deal with this?
Yeah, well, this is the reason in MMTCP that we have a really strong grounding of what it means to be a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher, because it's not a therapist, and there's an amazing medicine that you offer as a mindfulness teacher that can really serve people. So I'll just to give you a sense of the training, it means knowing how to recognize the symptoms of trauma and having an awareness of how certain meditations can actually bring it forward and exacerbate trauma, and knowing that there's other meditations that actually calm the nervous system, quiet the nervous system. It means being really sensitive to how, especially those from non-dominant groups, may be experiencing generational trauma. This is especially true with such a racist culture that it can be traumatizing just to be, if the group happens to be white dominant, what it can bring up. And so to have that kind of a sensitivity and a skill. And the final thing I'll mention is we teach people how to customize meditation so it can most serve the person they're working with. Teach that person how can they resource themselves. What are the things, the messages of loving kindness they can send to themselves? I'm putting my hand on my heart. What are the ways they might touch themselves to bring themselves back into presence? How do you orient? Look around and sense space and remember, I'm here, I'm not there. There's a lot of different practices that are beautiful, powerful practices that we offer that actually train teachers to be able to give something of incredible value, because meditation can help with trauma. It can also bring it up, and we need to know how to really serve that.
Just to say a little bit more, Tara, can you give me an example of the kind of meditation practice that might stir up trauma, and then the kind of practice, you started alluding to it,
Yeah.
that could help us access resources or calm us when we need that?
Yeah, so if somebody is sitting and they're beginning to feel a sense of agitation and they have a history of trauma and they have some symptoms of PTSD, then for them to be mindful of the agitation, to, as we often instruct, go right into it, feel it fully, be with it, is actually something that could have them be overwhelmed and flooded by the agitation because they don't have the resources, the space, the balance, the sense of enough safety to be able to be with it. So instead, we would say, for now, your practice is primarily loving kindness, perhaps, just to really offer your self-care. Or I might ask some questions to that person. And one of the key questions I ask is, what in the past has given you a sense of safety, of feeling safe and loved? And there may be a particular person that they bring to mind, or there may be a space that feels like sacred space to them, place outside. And we get the ingredients of what actually, if they bring to mind the person or the place, what actually lets their whole nervous system get quieted down. When we're traumatized, it's an emotional hijack, and we get disconnected from our whole brain, our whole body. We kind of shrink and get disconnected. And there are meditations that help us to reconnect to that wholeness and have a real sense of resilience in the midst of it. So it's knowing how to guide into that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jack, anything to add on this notion of training trauma-informed mindfulness teachers?
I can't also emphasize enough the quality of a loving and steady presence for someone who's experiencing trauma. Yes, you want to guide them to good resources, give them the right practices that help them. But I think of Houston Smith, who was a friend and this famous religion professor who wrote some of the most important books about world religion and so forth. And he had a great tragedy in his family where his granddaughter was killed. And he was in tremendous grief, as you could understand. And later on, when talking about it, he said, you know, people came and they gave him advice and they brought him things. He said, the thing that helped me most was down the street was this young Native American man. And he used to come over and just sit next to me and not say anything. And I could feel in his stillness and his love something that was timeless, like the earth that he and the native culture is so connected to. He said, and that presence meant more to me than almost anything else. And there's a way that we, as we train in mindfulness and compassion and with these tools, we also develop a capacity to be present and steady and loving in the midst of all that we go through as human beings. And that becomes an incredible resource or gift, that we're just there with people. It's not complicated, and it's not being some special teacher, but trusting that we can do this and learning how to do it is a really beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It brings,
just to
oh,
add one
please
thing,
go ahead. Yeah.
because what Jack just said, I was thinking of how many times I've been in a group and, you know, leading processes and having people share about what's going on, and having somebody who's experiencing or has experienced trauma name something and have somebody else say, yeah, yeah, me too, and then somebody else. And it's the Me Too movement in a meditation field. It's the sense that it's not my pathology, that there is a traumatized experience going on. It's we. And I don't know anything as healing as that shift from feeling isolated and alienated in trauma to feeling that belonging in the collective. And it happened, people in MMTCP, many people have trauma that are training to be teachers. A lot of us do. They find in their mentoring groups, because we have one of the ways that we support people is everybody's in a peer group and has a mentor, very, very intimate and beautiful. And they find that kind of healing there, just being able to be real and name the trauma and know that we're not alone in it. So I just wanted to bring in the power of collective belonging.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because I wanted to actually ask about that as well, because I think transformation happens, yes, with the input of a teacher and the practice, the teaching, but the power of the community is so key, how we heal each other. And if you could share a little bit more about how you both very intentionally designed that into the 2-year online process.
This is one of the things that I'm both moved by and happiest about in this program. When you go in, you have a mentor and a small mentoring group that you work with over the 2 years. You see your mentor 25 times in a small group or individually or more. And your peers another 25 or 50 times, along with all the teachings on how do you hold trauma, or how do you instruct people in loving kindness or compassion practice. There's some way in which we've built a community, and when you join this, you become part of a community, and within it a small intimate support group, truthfully. And I don't see this almost anywhere else in the online world. Part of what makes it so nourishing and transformative, just as Tara was saying, is that we go through the process together, in with one another. And it's one of the things that people celebrate. Not only did I learn all these things, but I now have these heart friends for the rest of my life, and we're in it together, and we've learned, and we're taking this out. It's that power of community is really central to the design of what we do, and it's beautiful.
And it keeps going. And we have in the DC area where I am, one of the groups is still meeting. They still have half-day retreats together, and there's been so much energy around sustaining community that we have an alumni group that has formed with the graduates to keep on, keep the community going. So there's a power to belonging to something that's both global, so you get all the resources and networking that of a global community, and also a small group of people who really know each other well and can keep supporting each other in their practice.
I think the thing that I'm hoping you'll both name even more explicitly, and it's because, here in my role, it sounds true. I often revisit this question: what creates real transformation for people? What really does it? All the books, all the great teachers, all the practices and long practice sessions, etc. And then I think of like spiritual friendship. And so, my heart just blows open. And I think that's the thing that has helped me the most, are those connections, those spiritual friendships. But I'm actually not 100% sure. I can't quite name why it's been such a powerful, transformative force. And I'd say in my experience, maybe, well, one of the most, but why is that?
I know what immediately comes up for me, Tammy, is that when we care about each other as friends, we see each other's goodness and we remind each other when we forget. And I don't think we have a deeper longing in the world than to trust our goodness and that we're connected. And our spiritual friends remind us of that in a way that we can deepen our sense of being at home with ourselves. So there's something about trusting goodness that it's like there's no greater gift than being a mirror of goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's some way also that when you ask what transforms us, and these deep relationships, and Tara talked about it, where you realize you shift from taking it so personally to realize, oh, this is our human life, this is human incarnation, and we all are dealing with this. And I can remember sitting in groups and someone will say, oh God, I'm having so much trouble in my relationship, or with my sexuality, or with money, or the things that are hard. And I'll pause and I'll just say, even in a new group, how many of you in this room have made an idiot of yourself in sexual relations? Every hand goes up. And then there's this big smile and everybody laughs. Or how many in this room have struggled with whatever that particular problem is? And then when we actually start to communicate with one another, what have you learned? How have you learned to manage this? There's an incredible kind of collective wisdom that starts to come out, that we learn from one another, and we feel that kind of strength coming not from us, but this is how we have, as human beings, have learned to navigate the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows that make up our life.
Now, I want to ask one other question about being a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher. So, as a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher, let's say someone in the group that I'm working with has a deep ancestral trauma of some kind, and somehow the meditation practice opens that up for them. They become aware of what their ancestors, people previous in their lineage, have suffered. How would you help that person, if you could, work with that in some way? And is there any way to even make an offering of the practice to benefit the past?
It's a beautiful question. And part of what you're talking about, Tami, is mystery. So I don't want to answer it in a glib way or say, okay, this is how it works with your ancestors or things like that. But we're not here alone, and we're not here separate from the stream of life that's given birth to us. In fact, we are that stream of life. And even the modern research, if you look at genetics, first of all, there's the epigenetic changes that are passed down from one generation to another. So you sit there, and my ancestors who fled pogroms in Russia or Ukraine or things like that, that's all in me. And so it's not individual, it's collective, and I can feel them in me. And then there are very simple practices to do to both offer what we do as a healing medicine, whatever you as ancestors have suffered. And sometimes they've suffered and sometimes they've caused suffering as well. There's both sides of it. And I remember being with Malidoma Somé, this dear friend who was a West African medicine man and shaman. He said, among the Dogra people, he said, one of the things we understand is you can choose your ancestors and that you connect with a lot. And if you have an ancestor that was, a slaveholder or whatever or something, said you can also, you can send them blessings and then move on to the ancestors you want to support you. That's being it's both true to what he said, but it's also being a little playful or creative as I speak of it. But there's something deeper. You start to feel that you are in the web of humanity. And by offering that what I do, may it be a benefit to you as ancestors, and may it be a benefit when I am the ancestor for the ones who come after me. And you feel a thread that you become part of that allows the moments of the good seeds you plant and the blessings and the understanding that start to grow in you to spread in time as well as right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so as I listen to you, Jack, part of what comes to mind is that with people I've worked with, when they start sensing that stream they're a part of, it actually shifts their relationship with the trauma. Because trauma's first effect is to bring up shame, a personal badness, and separation. So when we sense, oh, this truly wasn't my fault, this is really coming through time and through space and through that mystery, it's all of a sudden not my problem, and that's part of that creates more space and healing. I also want to just name, because you touched on it a bit, Jack, that it can be one of the most powerful ways to resource trauma, to draw on our ancestors, to sense the resilience. We're alive because they lived, they made it, to sense the creativity, to sense the love. Like I was working with a woman who's an activist here in Washington who's very, works with immigration and has a lot of trauma in her system, her families, and so on. Her great grandmother was a matriarch that was just so filled with, courage and strength and kind of a gorgeous kind of presence. She calls on her great grandmother and her grandmother, and she feels the flow of that courage, and it helps her enormously. So it's another pathway of resourcing that only needs to be included more and more, I think, in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, going back to our listener, I'm a listener advocate who's saying, wow, I feel so excited about this program. I really want to do it because I really want to deepen my own mindfulness journey in community with Jack and Tara. I don't know if I want to be a teacher though. Like, really? Like, I have a busy life. I'm doing all these other things. Really? I'm going to start teaching mindfulness? I just want to deepen. Is this program, the mindfulness meditation certification program, for such a person, or would they be better not taking it?
It's beautiful because it works both ways. Like, should I be a teacher? Should I not? The answer is yes. I like these kind of koans where you say A or B. How about yes? Because you actually don't know. And if you start it because you have a sense that you want to learn this, maybe just in yourself, or you can feel the benefit of having a community of people and so forth, and you wait and see. And some people take a pause after they go through it and then realize, oh, in my workplace, people are asking me, you seem different, you're calmer, or I've heard you did this. And all of a sudden, spontaneously happens, and you say, oh, yeah, I want to respond to it. Others actually are part of a community or a place which is wishing that they had somebody that could help them, or they have some idea of it. So one of the best things in approaching both the training and in general in a kind of spiritual evolution is not to have too many ideas of where it's going to go and who you become, but actually to do it and begin to trust that evolution will show you what's the right thing for you to do with it. And we have lots of people who start not knowing in some way, and it's completely fine. In fact, it's actually a good spirit to begin with.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like we teach who we are, and there's formal teaching, and then there's teaching in any moment when we're with our friend or our parent or a child. And one woman who was very shy, and she's actually teaching now, but she didn't think she was going to be. She taught her daughter, who was a teenager, who loved it, and brought some friends over, and she taught her daughter and a few friends, and then they started a sitting group in their high school. I just love the fact this parent was teaching her teens, and it just deepened their relationship, and it just set off some ripples. And now she's actually doing some teaching, but she didn't think that would happen. So it doesn't have to happen. The point is that if you cherish mindfulness and compassion, if you know that's just what really brings alive your heart and spirit, then you can just trust that it's going to emanate out the more you deepen roots in it.
Mhm. Now, we've been talking about the need for mindfulness teachers during this time of global trauma. And I think one of the other qualities of this time in our civilization's evolution is a feeling of divisiveness that many of us sense. I've heard so many stories during the pandemic of people who within their families, and since the election of Donald Trump, et cetera, within the American political system, there's this sense of, we don't talk to each other anymore. We just don't talk to each other. We're on opposite sides of this. We don't talk to each other. How does being a mindfulness meditation teacher and having more mindfulness meditation teachers out in the world help us in terms of this divisiveness so many of us are feeling in our lives?
Well, it's a really critical question for our time. And again, just to be, specific and practical, first, it helps us not to be so triggered, because the media and the culture works on whizzing us up and showing us the most divisive or fearful or difficult things, because it grabs our attention more, and we're wired for that. And then we go into all kinds of reactivity. And that's not a basis for actually having a meeting or a dialogue with someone who sees it differently. So the first thing is it starts to transform your nervous system, so you're not just reacting all the time. And then a second thing it does is that mindfulness, or we could call it mindful loving awareness, teaches us how to listen deeply. That there's a way in which, when we're not so reactive, we can start to look at that person or people or the other, what seems like the other point of view or other side with a kind of curiosity or tenderness or compassion or just interest. And nothing helps dialogue more than that kind of respect, that kind of deep listening. It starts with that, and you don't even know where it will go. But if you can look at someone that way, and I just recently got a call from someone who in their family has this big company and they've been running it together. And then one of them became very kind of QAnon right wing, and the other is a very liberal, AOC person. And how are we going to run this company? And I said, well, first, see if you can find a way just to be together without even talking about it, and feel the fact that you have loved each other for years, that you can find some presence and respect. And that's the place where the real dialogue can happen, with that kind of respect. And then each of you, I said, have something to learn from the other. And so enter and say, what is it that I have to learn from you? That's important. So all of these things come directly out of both the inner training and what we offer others.
Yeah, it's one of the real emphasized parts. We have part of the program just on how to communicate wisely. As Jack said, how to listen to understand. It's such a powerful training, and how to resolve conflicts. And I'm thinking right now about, it's just a couple of years ago, a woman who was in a group, and she was sharing this, that her brother, this was right after the murder of George Floyd, and her brother is a police officer, and she was feeling hatred and anger, and like she should be doing something to change him, and they were like completely alienated from each other. And so first came the inner work, and the inner work for her was to really sense underneath what was going on inside her, and to sense underneath that powerlessness and anger, that there was something she was desperately caring about, protecting people, and to get in touch with that and bring self-compassion to what was under all her anger. And that was crucial, because that gave her the space to look with a more clear, true heart at her brother, and remember, he had entered the police force with this a kind of idealism, but he wanted to help, and now he was reviled, by a lot of people, and he was hurt, and so that made it possible to start softening and bridging the divide. And I'm just sharing that example because these are trainings. We actually need to train on how, when instead of reacting as Jack described it, we have to, I sometimes think of it as a U-turn, like come and tend to what's going on inside us, so we can begin to see the other not as a bad other, see past the coverings to the human vulnerability and the human heart.
Mm-hmm. I'm imagining there's a group of people listening who are like, this is for me, I'm in, I've clicked the learn more button, this is for me. There's another group of people, I don't know, that's not for them. And then there's these people in the middle. And for the people in the middle, one question might be, what's the time commitment? Do I have the time for this? Like the people who are yes, they're like, I have the time for this. This is my heart. This is my inner imperative. I'm doing it. But then this like, do I have the time for this training?
I'm going to take a kind of try to answer, and maybe Tara can correct me, which I'm very happy about, to have a partner who I can listen to, who often knows more than I do about things. But my sense is that it's something like 5 hours a week, approximately, which includes the groups that you're a part of and the community that you're in, the teachings and the videos that you watch and learn from, the reading that you do or journaling. And that in some way, it turns out to be, it's both a big commitment over 2 years, there's no question about that, but that it also is workable. And most of the people who are part of it have a job, they have a family, and they find it, in fact, nourishing to do it. in the midst of that rather than a struggle.
Anything to add, Tara?
Mostly just that people go through it in their own way. And there's some people that actually will put in more just because it fits for them to put in more readings and, just more. We provide so many resources and so on. And there's others that do less. And there are times of the program. For a few months, somebody will have to like decrease and at other times increase. So the people don't flunk out because they didn't have enough time. That's not what happens. There's a flexibility. Now, if there's not an engagement in some basic way with the mentor group, let's say, that would get in the way of, really getting what you can get. And so, yes, it's a commitment and it's workable for people.
All right, let's go like kind of behind the curtain and have a little shop talk for a moment, if you will. I'm mixing metaphors here, but the two of you have been teachers for what? Collectively, we're talking about 8 decades, something like that. You've been teaching for a long time. Not, okay. What's, if you will, the deep fulfillment that's possible? And what's the like, yeah, you got to deal with this and it's hard and it's challenging and it's comes with it. Like, just tell us the truth. Being a mindfulness meditation teacher, what comes with it? The package. Be real.
I'm glad to jump in. To me, what I see and hear, the reports are that they have never experienced as transformational a program in their lives, that their lives are changed. And they're changed in the direction of this amazing gratification at helping others to wake up. And it's coming just because they keep waking up. And it's a sense of waking up together. So it's this incredible gratification. And Jack and I get to have that along with, we've got these amazing teacher mentors that are in the program with us. We get to watch people over 2 years unfold in amazing ways, including really inhabiting their confidence and their creativity and their intelligence and their heart in ways they hadn't expected. So I think that's the big one, is that real gratification at evolution. And I want to name that one of the domains of evolving that is surprising to people and yet right at the heart of it is multicultural sensitivity. That there's so much suffering at the biases we don't know we have that keep us from feeling our full belonging to each other. The racial biases, the class biases, religious biases. And a huge centerpiece of this program is our DEIA program, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility. And many don't even know how much they needed that element, and they come out feeling like it has opened their eyes and awakened their heart and connected them to the world in ways they couldn't have imagined. So, Jack, you might want to speak more to it, but those are some of the ways that people come out and really feel like they are being all that they can be.
And going back to your question, Tami, in another frame of thinking about years and decades of teaching, even from the beginning, it opens your eyes and it opens your heart. You not only see yourself more clearly, but you actually get to be present and see other people more clearly. And because you're practicing in the field of growing compassion, growing presence and empathy or loving awareness, that it changes who you are in some way. Your center of gravity changes, and you realize not because you're becoming some special person. In fact, if anything, I think the idea is to become more yourself, simple, but that there's a quality of presence that grows and ease and graciousness that's part of what blossoms in you in this role. And it's I just feel immensely grateful. We learn from each other. That's part of what makes us human beings from the very beginning, from the littlest children. We're all picking up and learning, and to be someone who's in this stream where we're actually learning forgiveness, compassion, mindful presence, balance, so forth. What a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Mhm. If you want to learn more about the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program, you can hit the Learn More button on this page. Just to tell you a little bit more about the program, and then we're all going to end together. Tara is going to lead us in a meditation where we can feel our connectivity as a group right here participating in this webinar. But to tell you just a little bit more about the program, it's a robust training in loving kindness, compassion, and mindfulness, 75 hours of video teachings, live sessions with Jack and Tara, guest teacher presentations. As mentioned, a robust racial awareness training. You'll also have the opportunity to attend 2 virtual gatherings led by Jack and Tara. You'll receive ongoing professional mentoring from highly respected meditation teachers, both individually and with a peer group. And at the end of 2 years, you'll graduate with a certificate of completion from the Greater Good Science Center, which will have you feeling with your certificate of completion and 2 years of training equipped to flourish as a mindfulness meditation teacher. Also, I just want to let you know that our previous cohort of the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program, we did reach capacity with the number of people who registered. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to apply on the soon side of life to make sure that there's space in the program. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tara to take us home here all together.
Well, one more thing, Tami, I want to add to the list of,
sure.
You also, in the second year of part of the program, you do a practicum and you get supervision and guidance. So even as a just beginning, budding new teacher, you find a place, we help you with that, and you actually learn to practice with wonderful support.
Beautiful. And if you have further questions, we have a team of people who they're standing by to answer whatever questions you might have.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Tami. And just feeling all of you in the field, you are very invited and welcomed. We'd love to have you with us. So in the spirit of us, of we, I'd like to actually begin by inviting you to connect inwardly, to take a pause. For some, you might want to close your eyes or let your gaze be downcast or softened. And just notice what's going on inside you right now. Perhaps you might collect your attention a bit with your breath, a few long, deep breaths. Feel a sense of letting go with the out-breath. Scanning and sensing if there's any unnecessary tension or tightness that you want to let go of. Letting the face be soft. Perhaps a slight smile. Relaxing the shoulders, the hands, and the belly. So you're feeling yourself right here. And you might listen a bit to your own heart. Just to take some moments to notice the state of your heart right now. And however it is, just to offer a gentle presence. You might notice what happens if you make some gesture of kindness towards yourself. I sometimes put my hand on my heart. There may be just a few words of kindness, of care, and just notice what happens. And then widening the field, sensing all of us here in some deep way caring about waking up our hearts and minds, caring about living from love, just to sense the field, other beings joining together. And you might widen that to sense this grouping, those gathering, as really stretching out endlessly and including all beings in our hearts. That together we're holding all beings, we're holding the earth, our mother, we're holding those in great difficulty and those who are flourishing. Ancestors and descendants, all directions. And just feeling our shared prayer that all beings everywhere might realize their very essence as loving awareness, that all beings everywhere might touch a great and natural peace, that all beings everywhere might awaken and be free. Thank you, friends, for being here. Blessings.